Hey, it's Dave Andreadakis with the Loyalty Leaders Podcast once again, and I'm sitting here with Roger Williams, an old-time friend, and we're going to talk a little bit about loyalty. Now, Roger Williams leads the Center of Excellence for Loyalty over at Marigold. Now, Roger, you've been in this game for quite a bit now, right? I mean, how long have you been doing this?
Oh gosh, Dave, it's probably about 25 years now.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of change happen, both from an agency side, because there's a lot of players that have kind of come and gone during that time, but also when you're looking at the different brands that are out there, what's happening in airline, what's happening in retail, what's happening in banking, so much change. I'd love to touch on a couple of these things.
Yeah, and gosh, I actually started my career in the late 90s as a loyalty manager for an airline. So,
Really?
yeah, that was the beginning of the passion, and certainly, yeah, I went through some of the agency stuff and on the software side and everything else, and lots of changes, but it always comes full circle.
It always does. You're not allowed to leave this industry.
No.
It always just kind of keeps you close and pulls you in.
It's the lotus petals. It's just, yeah, keep eating them.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that a little bit. So airline, just in particular, sometimes it feels like they're going through a rough time. Other times it feels like they're doing just exactly what they want. But I do see a lot of change happening right now in the travel space. I see airlines investing in technologies that are going to open up new marketing opportunities for them, being able to get more one-to-one marketing even during the flight and other things that are happening. Do you see a revival happening in travel loyalty right now?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a renewed interest in that one-to-one marketing. Certainly, there's a lot of drivers of that. I think right now, AI and machine learning and various iterations is dominating that conversation. But really, what I'd like to remind our colleagues of is just old school loyalty practice. And this is coming from the airline space, where yesterday we were talking about promotional marketing is possibly killing our golden goose in loyalty. And in fact, it's a patience play. It's a longer play, right? And where you're putting someone into a loyalty life cycle and then looking at the ebbs and flows of that and preserving those margins, not just retaining them, because that's going to happen anyway. But really our goal is to create that incrementality and through a number of things. So we've lost sight of that, and I think we need to get back there. To address your question directly, yes, that personalization, we've been trying to do that for 15 years. We've been talking about that at events, personalization. But, we have privacy headwinds, right? We were talking about at the summit yesterday, it's like, well, how high can the creepiness factor be? Yeah. And we actually have one really simple solution for that at Marigold, which is one of our superpowers. And it's the way we use zero-party data contextually with other signals. So instead of going through someone's trash and kind of being that way, right? We actually like to just have a conversation, like you and I are having a conversation right now. Yeah. So I'd like to address the listeners. Imagine if, as a marketer, you could have a conversation, a dialogue with each and every one of your customers. So if you have millions of customers out there, millions of members, imagine having that conversation. Think of it that way. Well, how do I do that? Well, we happen to enable that, sure, in simple parlance. And what it will be is, imagine just kind of going through a workflow and being able to ask contextually, whether it's through a live clicker email that's going to have a live poll in the email, and you don't have to leave the email to answer the poll. It'll be super simple, really snappy. What are your preferences? You let us know, we record that, and then we can then use that in a timely manner. Yeah. Because that's another trick, right? Sometimes we wait a little too long and we forget, right? The customers may forget what they shared. So for me, that's true personalization, where it's really having that dialogue, opening up with the dialogue, and continuing that throughout the life cycle of the customer.
I think so too. I mean, look, communication and personalization, if there's a flow of conversation with anyone, it removes the need to be too overly prescriptive about anything. And one of the advantages I think Marigold has, given your roots in communication and messaging and all that, is really the art of how to talk to a customer. right? So you've got information. A lot of companies do have information, and they can go get at it. But turning that into something that's meaningful and relatable to a customer, so that they're willing to say, not only do I want to open that and look at that and read it, I don't feel marketed to. I actually feel communicated with and spoken to. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how Marigold does that?
Absolutely. And it really is, actually, you should be marketed to, because I think we've lost sight of what marketing really needs to be, right? It's distinct from advertising, and, yes, it's part of sales, but, instead of being felt like you're being sold to, what being marketed to truly means, Dave, is I am going to upfront remove friction in your experience with my brand. I'm going to remove all those friction points, make it easy for you, and solve whatever problems that we know about you from that discussion that we've been having, right? Yeah. Customer and brand. And then I'm going to create this magical, aspirational vision that's going to last throughout a relationship. And that's really what it is. And it's starting with that questioning, and then knowing what those friction points are, removing it, and then it so happens that the call to action is below that. Yeah. Or the offer, or the reward, or the discount. But it's not opening an email or a text message and seeing 25% off or BOGO, right? Yeah, I mean, people may or may not appreciate that, but yeah. Let me ask you a question. Do 100% of your addressable audience convert on, let's say, 25% off?
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Right? So it was that great, then, but, probably a very high rate of them will convert on when they have reached the maturity of their reward cycle, because they've earned that. So as opposed to a granted discount, it's an earned discount, and when you give them the flexibility and the freedom to use that, when they want to, like, points as a form of currency, that's on-demand rewards, then we see those higher organic rates. But guess what? It requires a lot more work, right? So there's workflows that go with that. And we make that easy for the marketer, because we are a home for every marketer. So we're going to make that easy to communicate with the customers. We're going to make it easy to be in our loyalty system, make all those configurations, all the complex rules that govern those life cycles, the tiers, everything else, expirations, upgrades, downgrades, super complex, right? You got to get that right every time. But you also need to communicate at scale. So it all comes together in one beautiful relationship marketing platform.
I got you. So we talked earlier about you've been around for a minute. You've seen a lot of changes. What are brands asking for out of agencies now that they weren't asking for 20 years ago?
Gosh, that's a loaded question. I really. One of the things that we see is there is a contraction in terms of just resources. I don't know if you've noticed this, but marketing departments have gotten smaller. Yeah. Loyalty departments have sometimes disappeared. Yeah. Right? And now we have folks that are a little bit out of place that are doing a function that maybe they were just they found themselves in that. And where I've met a lot of loyalty marketers, at this event there's a lot of retailers, we come from more of a travel background, we interface a lot of airlines, but it's really interesting to see the community here of retail marketers start to pick up loyalty and see what that's all about. So
I mean, that's part of that is that if you talk to any great student coming out of a decent school now, a marketer with a little bit of statistics background or something, they're largely doing jobs that people had to be in the loyalty industry for 10, 15 years before to do. So there's a smarter group of employees coming in. They're missing some context though, right? Yeah. The other thing is that brands are contracting because they're looking for efficiencies out of technologies. So those two things, right, it result in we need more hiring of great smart people, and we need to leverage technologies. What are the tools that Marigold is offering right now to these brands to say, hey, I've got some of these tools that will help you survive with a smaller marketing department?
Yeah, I mean, the entire platform, let's start with insights. I notice I said insights and not necessarily reporting, right? And we think it's really important for your data to be insightful. It might sound trivial for someone like yourself with your level of experience, but we think that's really important for especially a contracted marketing team where there's more pressure on you. You have to kind of separate a lot of that noise. And the first thing that we do is to really give you clean reporting along with a human interface. So there's always a strategy present in that relationship in the form of a strategist. Our strategy team is extensive, led by Michelle Fitzpatrick, and we attach the strategist to pretty much every relationship, and we start there. So those insights are super important, whether we're looking at certain trends, or looking at where we can drive additional frequency or additional margins. We're going to guide you in that. The second thing that we're doing, and actually this is happening on our loyalty platform, is we are creating a more prescriptive approach, more templated. In the past, as you know, we work with a lot of really large brands on the loyalty side of things. Most recently KFC, right?
Yeah.
Pretty big brand. In the past, what we've done, because these brands are large and sophisticated, is that we have a large and sophisticated platform, and our engineers and tech resources and project managers will sit in a room and we'll say, "What do you want to do?" and that question can sometimes add an extra 2 months to the implementation process, right? So that go-to-market after you've signed on a dotted line and you're in our ecosystem, we're in the past, we've really left it up to a lot of smart marketers to kind of, hey, what do you want to do? Now we're actually modifying that a little bit. I mean, you can still do that because we're still working with some really, really talented folks, but we're also introducing, because we have a broader breadth of the market, from the top all the way down market, where this templated approach is, here's what we believe you should do.
Yeah. I was going to ask about this because obviously I have a little peek under the hood because we're close in that. But a lot of companies just have salespeople and then they turn it over to some sales engineers later on, or to some business analysts to help try to figure out what it is that needs to be implemented. But throughout your sales process, you have a customer success team that is helping to find the right solution. You begin consulting with your clients during the sales process. Can you talk a little bit about how that's impacting the success of your clients and how that differentiates Marigold?
It's huge, and it's even before that success team. Which, by the way, our customer success team, I'm very proud of this. They're all certified, right? They're all CLMPs.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And you might have noticed that we have some business development personnel here, some of which you know really well. They've been around a long time. They were on stage, and they speak like strategists because they are. Right? So we lead with strategy. We lead the entire process. It begins with, what are you solving for? Let's look at what your goals are. And it just so happens that, we can sell you a system, but it doesn't start there. We're really trying to be partners and figure that out. And sometimes it's not always a good fit, because as the strategist, myself and my colleagues, we're actually allowed to speak to prospects before, say business development, and that sort of thing. And in some cases, we might say, we might want to take a slightly different approach, or maybe this is not the right time. Like things that salespeople wouldn't ordinarily say, right? Yeah. And we are allowed to say that because it has to be genuine. It has to go both ways. We have to be a good fit. Yeah. Right? It's not just about making a sale. So that happens, and then obviously the customer success, like you said, they're there from the beginning. So as a client, you're going to get to know the team that's going to carry you through our partnership. Yeah. For the foreseeable future.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I have a phrase that's, the fastest way to get fired is to do exactly what the client tells you to do, right? And then you come with all this experience, and you are there to help and to guide and facilitate a great solution for them. Bringing ideas is not just something that should be done in the beginning. You continue to do that throughout the life cycle of your relationship with them. And it's a bit of an art that I think is being stressed right now in the space. There's a lot of price compression on technology. There's some big technologies coming in from the top. There's some smaller a lot of smaller fragmented technologies coming in from the bottom, and the true customized solutions and powerhouses that are the mainstay of loyalty providers. We're finding it harder and harder to provide all of the services that you did in the past. Yet, most of them, Marigold included, continue to hold on to. We will continue to give you that strategic advice. We'll continue to guide you to the best solution possible, because the program won't last very long if it's not a good, solid program.
Yeah, and because it works. And I'll give you an example, but before I share that with you, all the time I hear it from our solutions architects, sales engineers, the folks that are in our technical departments, where even among themselves in their own meetings, they may not know I'm on the call, and one of them is going to shout out, "Did strategy see this?
Yeah.
Has this new customer or prospect spoke to strategy? I'm not going to touch this. I'm not going to T-shirt size this until strategy speaks to them." Right?
Yeah.
They insist on that because they know it's going to make their job a lot easier.
Yeah.
But the example I want to share with you, Dave, is tiers. Is a good example where you'll have, in especially say like in the QSR space that we're very dominant in, and I came from the airline space. You'll often see, a little bit of airline modeling with tiers, right? So I'm going to start a program for my hot dog stand, and I'm going to have 4 tiers, right? And global services or something like that. So this is often, right? And it's I'm not being facetious. It's not necessarily an extreme example. It's very much rooted in the truth, but we would politely say, perhaps that's not for you, right? Your hot dog stand. So we like to keep it simple. Sometimes it might get a little bit over complex. And also in tiers too, you may not be necessarily ready if you're a nascent program, because you're going to have to maybe unpublish those tiers, and we can do that in a segmentation model and have our data scientists look at it. And then we're going to say, hey, organically, you have 2 tiers, or maybe 3, or maybe none, right?
Yeah.
And then that dictates the tiers, and then you can then go to your marketing and say it's going to be silver, gold, and platinum, or whatever you want to name your tiers.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great observation, and it must feel a little bit like, when somebody comes into a doctor and they tell them exactly what the diagnosis is, and the doctor's like, well, why don't you leave that to me a little bit? But look, look, we as strategists, we see down the road and around the corner very often, right? And there's things that you can do that you can't unwind. It's hard to throw a value proposition out to customers and then claw that back. It's hard to start giving something to someone and then say you're no longer going to receive that as part of your membership. It doesn't feel like, hey, I was at 0, they gave me this thing that brought me to 8, and they adjusted it to 6. It feels like I was at 8 and you took it from me.
Yeah.
Right, and so strategists are really good at seeing the financials as well as seeing the competitive implications of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So I've got just a couple more questions for you, and I've really enjoyed the conversation so far. It's always conversational when we talk. It's less QA and it's much more let's get under the hood and talk some shop, which I really enjoy. One is that I've been asking this of a lot of people lately. Let's go back 25 years and pretend I'm Roger sitting across from you. What advice would you have for Roger to say, hey, man, it's going to be an interesting 25 years. If you want to make it easy on you, pay attention to these things and maybe do a little less of this?
Yeah, wow. Man, you always come with those great questions. So the one thing I would give to my younger self is don't aspire or be worried about being the smartest guy in the room. Right? Don't think you have to sound, whatever that means, like the smartest guy in the room. I was really concerned with that as a 23-year-old loyalty manager in my early days. And I would say, instead of that, be the best listener. Just really, take it in, process, allow people to speak. That's kind of a lost art.
Yeah.
A lot of people interrupt each other now. I don't know. It seems like it's more, right? But that's the advice I'd give myself, because you'd be surprised what you can take in. Because if your mouth is moving, your brain's probably not working the way it should be, and you're not intaking anything. So you're just putting out right? And if you haven't, it's garbage.
That's right. So the last question I have for you is an AI question, right? And so a lot of times as technology advances, we as humans try to replicate exactly what we would do as humans, but with technology. And so when we watched the Jetsons, we saw an actual human robot with a vacuum cleaner, Rosie out there cleaning the floor. But in reality, it's evolved to a little circle that just kind of goes around your house and sweeps up after you, because that's the more functional thing. Right. Most of what I'm seeing with AI is reducing the cost of current human operational activities. That's great. It's going to help the bottom line, free up some capital, all that. But AI is really going to unleash its goodness on loyalty when it starts doing things that humans cannot do. What are the problems that you're seeing in the industry that you are looking forward to AI helping us solve?
I'm going to be very frank. I think we have a crisis that's going to materialize in AI, especially generative AI, this year. And some of that you can see really in the graphics and motion picture photography, of which I'm an old retired commercial photographer, and you're seeing now where actually Adidas recently did an entire ad, motion picture advertisement, not using an agency or human models or a camera. All the people that were in that ad that looked fairly realistic were AI. And I think we're going to have a significant legal issue, and we saw a preview of that in the recent Hollywood strikes, where things were written into contracts to protect human assets, right? Or you can only represent Harrison Ford in a certain way. Like, you just can't replace him entirely in a movie with AI. His younger self could be AI, whatever. So I think we're going to see more of that, but there's going to be a bigger deal where, if you think about it, as a photographer that's published, I was sent a notification along with other published image makers that if we wanted to opt out of AI training. And AI training is something that is extremely concerning. There was a 60 Minutes piece on this recently. That's a whole nother kettle of fish, but trust me on this, it's a quagmire. And what we have is, I developed my photography style based looking at certain photographers that I respect. And I created my own style, but it's influenced by them. Yeah. But then what is AI when it trains off of my tonality and lighting and all the things that I had to use experience to develop?
It took your 30 years of experience doing that.
It's copying it.
Grabbed it all in one fell swoop, right?
Yeah. So, I think we're going to have a serious IP issue. So that's one thing. That's the bigger part, generative and all that stuff. Back to our sector and loyalty, I don't think we need that stuff. Yeah, we're using some generative stuff to, like, say, do subject lines for email and that sort of thing, like Grammarly. Yeah. That stuff is great. But for what we do in loyalty with the statistics and the data science, we've been using machine learning
for decades. That's right.
Which they've constantly improved, and it's great. So there's nothing really net new there, Dave, where we're still using propensity models, propensity to churn, offer optimization. We just refreshed our AI set. And actually, you know what we did? We simplified it in terms of the interface. We used to have a tool called Citizen Data Scientist. And it allowed you to go in there and tweak a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of little signals and that kind of thing. Really, really complex, interesting. And we thought this is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. It wasn't that popular because the average marketer, like you said, it's contracted. They just need something simple. Is this good, somewhat good, or bad? Yeah. And guess what? It's basically that. It's green, amber, red, and it tells you high propensity, low propensity. So we've simplified the output. And of course, the models underneath it, they're better. They're more reliable. So it's really a seamless transition, not a big shift, paradigm shift for us marketers. Yeah. But in the world around us, stay tuned.
I think so as well. Roger, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Great being here.